Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IRSportsDaily.com. I'm your host, Greg Flammang. With me, as always, is Jamie Uyeyama, Mr. Jamie University, and we have our colleague at Irish Sports Daily, Christian McCollum, in the show. It is a very special day. It is hard to get Christian on the show. We tried to get him on Tuesday. He's like, I'm on the road. I'm working. Like I'm talking to recruits. I'm watching recruits, getting video of recruits. He's never not working. That's why we can't get Matt on the show. He's working right now. I guarantee you, Matt is working right this second. So we have Christian on the show. He's going to give us his insight on Notre Dame's recruiting run that they are currently on. Just picked up a commitment from Georgia running back Jonas Walton, a 4-star player, top 200 player on 247 composite. So we're going to talk about that, talk about Tiki Hola, talk about the run that Notre Dame's going on. And that's going to be the bulk of the show today. It's going to be very fun. Thank you all for tuning in. If you like what you hear, please hit the like button. Please hit subscribe. Please hit the notification bell so whenever it is. We are going live. Links to the podcast are in the description below. And as always, the show is brought to you by ESQ Clothing, founded by Notre Dame alum Ge Wang. You've seen ESQ and all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches. With over a decade making the best custom clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best in 2025. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt or bomber jacket, or the perfect tuxedo for wedding season. Check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com. Book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 10% off your entire purchase. That's esqclothing.com. Christian, welcome to the show. What were you doing? What we were traveling on Tuesday. What were you doing? Who were you seeing?
Yeah, so New England they've done this for a few years now where it started in Connecticut. They have a show day, and what they do is they're smart. They have all the prep schools coordinate their workout times. And so college coaches come in from all over America. They hit Brunswick first, which is as far south in Connecticut as you can get, 2.5 hours away from me, 6 a.m. I skipped Brunswick this year. I skipped Brunswick 2 years ago, and I kicked myself because obviously Notre Dame ended up with two guys from Brunswick in that class, Matty Augustine and Ethan Long. So I went to Brunswick last year to see both those guys, and that ruined my week. I think I had to leave my house at 4 a.m. So Brunswick is no longer on the docket for me. But they worked their way up all the way through. Ends in Springfield, Massachusetts, my hometown at Central High School. But it's a really, really good event so that college coach can come in and they can hit one school, see everybody, go to the next school. It's all day, starts at 6 a.m. The last stop starts at 8 p.m. And in the last couple of years, Massachusetts has added itself on. So that starts again on Tuesday, where they just go from west to east, start very, very far west in the state, and they end in Boston. So it's a ton of kids, every level of college, high Power 4, all the way down to Division 3. I know there was 120 coaches at stop I was at yesterday. A handful of Notre Dame guys get to see. I went to Cheshire Academy on Monday, got to see 2027 quarterback Keegan Croucher throw. That was my big stop on Monday. And then Tuesday, I went to go see 2027 quarterback Peter Bork and 2026 defensive lineman Marcus Almada, both at Tabor Academy. It's in my home state, but it's literally almost at Cape Cod. So it's like a 2.5 hour drive. So that's why I wasn't available on Tuesday, Greg.
Christian hitting and hustling. That's right, Jamie. We love to see that.
You guys are just still in here. This is misnomer of a name. Hit and hustle. These guys are in recliners and stuff.
Recliners. Listen, this is a very nice chair.
You got
that I
like a $350 gaming chair you're sitting on right now.
It's literally the neighbor put it out on the street. They were replacing theirs, and I said, "Hey, can I have that?" So that's the chair that I've got going on. Real quick question. Notre Dame just received a commitment from Jonas Walton, running back. That makes Notre Dame's second running back in the class to join Javon Osborne. The question from CFB Hertz is, I've seen a question he's seen elsewhere. We're going to bring it here. Is Notre Dame still actively recruiting Brian Bonner?
I don't want to say no for sure, but I would see that as very unlikely for them to bring three guys in the class.
Yeah, it's because Brian Bonner, it's one of those things where it's like you could actively recruit him, but Brian Bonner's probably going to go somewhere where they don't have two running backs in the thing, right? Like I think Notre Dame, it's not so much that Notre Dame doesn't want it. It's like at this point that the running back kind of feels like, okay, like I need to go somewhere where I'm not part of a trio like this, right? That's just a number situation, right? And I know we like to say things like, oh, you want to compete or whatever. It's like, yeah, but there's only one ball. And I mean, look at Notre Dame's running back situation right now. Like
they already got a ton of good backs. It's not a situation where who would want to be the third back in a class when you already know that they got like a stacked position. There's a lot of young guys, obviously, like Love and Price are gone, Payne probably gone after this year too, but like you still got a bunch of other guys that are going to be there.
Yeah. And Jonas and Javion are great kids, and they're obviously don't mind competing against each other. But I think the plan for them was to bring two guys in. So now you're going to keep chasing a third guy who you're not going to get and run the risk of someone else coming in and trying to throw some sand in the gears with what you already have. Let's
talk about some of the latest happenings, right? Christian and I were talking before the show about how a month ago that we had a show where one of the topics was what's going on with Notre Dame recruiting. Since then, there's been 9 commitments to the Notre Dame football class. The latest is Jonas Walton that happened yesterday. And just kind of let's talk about the running back specifically, because Notre Dame was not in on Javion Osborne really until Juwan Sider came in. And now you've got Osborne and you've got Jonas Walton. Kind of talk about how Notre Dame was able to get in on Osborne so quickly and just kind of strike that while it was hot. And then they were able to land Jonas Walton as well. They were in on him, but that really kind of ramped up when Sider came on board with the staff. Yeah, like you said, Sider really helped him get across the goal line with Osborne. And that thing was a done deal. And it wasn't even like a secret for a long time. Afterwards, as soon as he cut it down to Notre Dame and Michigan, it was like, well, he's going to Notre Dame. Everybody knows, even the Michigan homers. As far as Walton goes, he's a kid that had serious interest in Notre Dame from the beginning, right? I was skeptical. I was being told we got a great shot at this kid, Jonas Walton. And I'm like, okay, all right. Sometimes early in the process, they think they have a great shot. They might not actually materialize. Then he comes up to visit in January. It's like, okay, we're going to find out. And when he left that visit, it was clear to me that, Notre Dame, they had a better chance than I initially thought. And leaving that visit, they had a better chance than they initially thought. And it was everything. And down to one of the things I think stood out to Jonas and his family was the people in South Bend. They had no idea how they were going to be received. They had no idea what the culture was going to be like in the Midwest, how they were going to feel. And I'm talking about people on the street that saying hello, welcome, just being nice. That kind of stuff made a huge impact. Obviously, with McCullough leaving, that was kind of a moment of, all right, what's going to happen here now? But they had built up so much interest in him. And a lot of that credit goes to Marcus Freeman, that he never was like, okay, I got to look elsewhere. It was more of a, okay, let me see what they're going to do. And then when they got Sider, they formed that relationship quickly, came back for a visit last month. And from there, it was pretty much a done deal. Notre Dame had the lead, and then they weren't going to relinquish it. Yeah. What do you attribute to the run here, right? I think a layperson on the outside would just say Notre Dame got the recruiting staff put in place, and then they were able to kick it into gear. They pretty clearly had I don't want to say their ducks in a row. They were set up to go on a run if they would just get their staff.
They did well on the visits, yeah.
But on the inside, from your perspective, what has kind of led to this? What is the drive for Notre Dame to go from a class that like we said, we were questioning whether or not it could be good enough, or it was going to be up to par, right? Why can't Notre Dame capitalize on the good season they just had? And you were wondering when are they going to make a push here? And now Jamie's putting in 6 thoughts on a Thursday. I'm going to get to that in a second about how this could be Notre Dame's best class under Marcus Freeman and the best class in a very, very long time. What has kind of led to that push there? So the turnaround to me it's 2 separate questions, right? So what led to them stalling and you guys having a show a month ago about what's going on, and what led to them now taking off? The stalling, I think it really is the idea that they weren't on the road in December because they were in the college football playoff. Yeah. They weren't on the road in January because they made all the way to the national championship game.
and the staff turnover that led to, then you got like 3 weeks until signing day. And now after signing day, we have the staff shakeup. That stuff, like a lot of things seem like intangible, like they don't matter. That stuff matters, right? You're not in the schools. You're not setting up visits. You're not locking down, hey, we need to get you on campus. You're not getting that stuff set up. You know, your focus is rightly so on Penn State, Georgia, Ohio State. You're not able to like make all the phone calls, do all the recruiting stuff. That stuff matters. And then you have a sprint to signing day, and then you lose your GM, you lose your running back coach, your DC, your staff's kind of up in the air. You can't even, it's hard to recruit a defensive player and say, all right, what are we running? And you're like, I don't know. We'll find out when the new coordinator comes. That stuff actually matters and makes a difference. And as far as what they, how they've gone on a run, I've asked guys that. And the guys are like, yeah, well, it's this place sells itself. And I'm like, yeah, but this place is whatever you're selling sells itself for 25 years, forever. And then, finally what they'll say, obviously they give a lot of credit to all the other staff members and colleagues. But in the end, it's what you said, Greg, the success of last season. For years, Notre Dame has sold the idea that you can come here, you get a world-class education, and you compete for a national championship. That second part was always a little kind of, you got
like selling hope.
Yeah. Now we just played in the national championship 4 months ago, right? We could have won that game. We are literally competing for national championships, and I think that is the difference. Along with, we said this when Freeman was hired as a head coach. He's only gonna hire staff members that are gonna want to recruit and be good at it. So those guys are like eager. Like I had a chance. Notre Dame wasn't at the show days that I was at yesterday, earlier this week. But if you go to those things and you're around 120 college coaches at an event, you can see the coaches that are just there because they have to be. They're saying hello, catching up with colleagues they haven't seen. Kind of more like me with like kind of grind, and the guys that are like up there. They're asking the recruit to do this workout. They're saying, do this. They're right there. Those are the kind of guys that Freeman has on staff, and that makes a difference.
You know what? This kind of leads into, because I wanted to ask you about this, Chris, because I think everybody knows that, Chad Bowden, went to USC. Obviously, he's, doing a million interviews and talking about, saying some things that, a bit petty, I would say, with some of his stuff, but clearly, like, everyone has to acknowledge that, like, the roster that they built right now, he was a big part of recruiting that roster, and did, for the most part, did a really good job. But I just wanted to ask you about for the most part, it's the same staff. Obviously, he's, like you said, new defensive coordinator, Sider, obviously replacing McCullough at running back. But it's primarily the same staff. Only 2 staff changes isn't huge, but there's a lot of different people in the recruiting office. I think Carter Almond is like one of the only guys who was kind of carried over. Have you noticed a difference in maybe talking to recruits when they go on visits, when they visit Notre Dame, or just like how, when you're talking to some of these coaches or whatever, has there been a different approach? This is the first time we're seeing them out on the road, but is there a different approach to the way that they've like kind of handled recruiting as a whole under that kind of like the new regime?
The only thing I would say about that is when Chad was in charge, he had his hands in everything, right? So he was evaluating players. He was scheduling, trips to go here and there. He was talking to guys. Now, I think Carter and some of the other guys probably do all that stuff too, but like they also are able to, like, it seems like delegated a little bit more, right? Where Chad was very, very much involved on everything in terms of, like I said, recruiting guys, talking to guys. He was a big part of Dallas Golden's recruitment, right? Dallas Golden might not be there without Chad Bowden. It's not like a recruiting coordinator thing of scheduling. It's like being on the phone, playing video games with these kids. But I wonder, that stuff can spread you thin, right? And you only have so much bandwidth. Where right now, I think the staff here, it's a little bit more of a team effort, I would say. And I think there's a lot of benefits to that. And I think a lot of the guys they've been put in roles. Everyone kind of elevated a little bit. So they'll kind of probably grow, and you'll see them take larger roles individually. But the idea of having the team aspect is good. And then they have have new responsibilities, right? Like Mike Martin is the general manager. He's not doing the same things that Chad was doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very
a little
different.
bit more. It seems a little bit more of a professional organization with the structure of it, I'd say.
We get the NIL question a lot. Justin Kane has it. How active is Notre Dame with NIL for high school recruits? What is your perspective on that?
I'd say very active. I know like NIL, the way it came out was, kind of a dirty word. It was like legalized bagman and stuff like that. And I think Notre Dame for a period there thought they could get away with not playing the NIL game. And to their credit, they actually did for that first year. I mean, there was what they were offering that first year when it was kind of the Wild Wild West versus some of these other schools. It is mind-boggling. They got a kid like Jeremiah Love, right? Like the numbers, the gulf in the numbers was so drastic. I'm not sure I had to let my son make the decision he made. Okay. Yeah. Notre Dame is no longer playing by those rules. They are very active in NIL. Now, I believe the way it's been told to me, I believe it seems like it bears out. They're not going to get in bidding wars for guys. If your number one priority is NIL, you're probably not going to end up at Notre Dame, and that's probably okay with them. You're probably not the kid that they want anyways, and that's not a knock on anybody, right?
Right.
If my son's going to get $3.5 million to go somewhere, we're looking.
Some of those guys still end up being studs. Like, it's just be honest, not everyone is a selfish, a-hole if that's what they want, because sometimes those guys are. I'm not saying it's Travis Hunter, but sometimes that's Travis Hunter kind of guy. Yeah. And you're like, yeah, I get it why this guy wants all that money. Yeah.
So, and like, I know it seems crazy, like the idea of like, all these kids these days, they want money to go on visits and X, Y, and Z. And that does seem crazy, but why do they want money to go on visits? Because someone paid them money to go on a visit.
Because somebody else did. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but when it comes to Notre Dame, when they get in a guy they want and they feel like he's the right fit, they understand like that you'd be crazy to turn down, a school like Ohio State and 2 times the money to go to Notre Dame. That's not going to happen. So they will, say, all right, we think you're a good fit. We understand. We think you're worth X. This other school might think you're worth Y. They'll get close enough. They'll be competitive. Sometimes they will win the NIL battle. But don't fool yourself and think like Notre Dame is, not playing the same game that everyone else is playing. If you don't want to play that game, you're not going to be playing big time college football, and you certainly aren't going to be competing for national championships.
Yeah, I mean that definitely appears to be the case, right? And like, it's not that, like you guys have said, it's not like these are bad kids. If you're focused on NIL and you want as much money as possible, like this is the world that we live in, right? And a lot of people, I think people, it feels weird because they're young, right? These are 17, 18-year-old high school athletes, so it feels strange. But from a business perspective, like it makes all the sense in the world to be like that. It just like that sort of mindset doesn't necessarily lend itself to Notre Dame. Not that it doesn't lend itself to success, right? So like obviously if Jeremiah Smith is commanding a lot of money and like that's going to be a bidding war situation, fine, right? And he's obviously worth it. Whatever is paid for him, like he's worth it because he's that talented. But like it doesn't mean that that's going to be a Notre Dame fit. Not that Notre Dame wouldn't go after him. It's just that you're not going to get into a bidding war because you'll probably lose, right? Because of just the type of situation that it is.
Well, I want to bidding war is the key phrase there, right? Like let's say Jeremiah Smith checks all the boxes and they love him and he loves Notre Dame. Another school's going to offer him who knows how much money. Like, it's not to say Notre Dame's not going to say, all right, let's make this work. But if we're going, all right, here's what I got from Missouri. Here's what I got from UCLA. Here's what I got from A&M. What can you guys do for me? If that's the opening conversation, it's not going to be a fit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, too, the one thing that people got to know is that it's so competitive now that, like, everybody is doing it. So it's not like you might get where this year with the portal, Texas Tech's got the billionaire guy who's, like, given out huge deals to these guys and those guys, I mean, to me, I'm like, man, it's just red flags all over the place because all those guys just picked it because of the money. They don't like Lubbock, Texas, right? So I have a think like there's a good chance that that's going to go really bad. for them. But I think when you're talking about like recruiting, Georgia obviously has NIL packages, but they're not outbidding people because they're Georgia. They don't have to, right? But they'll lose a kid and be okay with it sometimes because of that, right? Like they lost the Justice Terry kid to Texas. I mean, let's be honest. I'm sure he picked Texas. It wasn't because he liked Texas more. It was like they gave him that a little bit extra that they didn't, and that happens sometimes. I think for the most part, though, like you said, Chris, I think the big thing with NIL and when it comes to Notre Dame kids is there's so many people, and this is why so many of the guys who were like ex-pros, like guys who played in the league, like in the NFL, who want their kids to go to Notre Dame because they see, like, yeah, of course, they don't want their kid to get screwed over and not get what they're worth, but they also see the big picture of like, hey, what is this going to mean like down the line? And are you going to go to this one school and then if you have a bad year, you're going to get cut, and then all of a sudden you're looking for the next thing, and maybe that check's not going to be as big at the next place. Like they think about that kind of stuff, and that's why so many of those guys, I think, they push their kids towards Notre Dame because they kind of know, like, hey, that's going to count for something. Like that's going to matter because if you don't make the league, because we're not counting on anything. You need to have this.
And those guys also know how far money goes and how far money doesn't go,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I always think, too, like, I know this is, like, going back, but remember Evander Holyfield, right? Because his kid, Elijah Holyfield, and he was a guy, like, you wouldn't think because you don't think of him as, like, man, this is a guy, a forward-thinking guy, Evander Holyfield, but he was all about Notre Dame. He wanted Elijah Holyfield to go to Notre Dame, and that really stuck with me because I just remember thinking that, and I was like, wow, he's from Georgia. He's an Atlanta guy. Like all this, it's like, why wouldn't he want his kid to go to Georgia? You would just think it would just make sense, but it was like, no, he was like thinking Notre Dame. It's just like how like Ryan Clark and the same kind of thing. It's just there's just a lot of that, and it's also too why you get like. Larry Fitzgerald's kid is like, well, I'm going to camp at Notre Dame a bunch of times. And even though you think, Larry Fitz played for Pitt, probably hates Notre Dame, he's probably like, I wish Notre Dame would offer me in high school or something like that, right?
Yeah. Notre Dame offered Tiki Hola, and he committed to them. Christian, what led to that? Right, like there was USC was heavy on that, and then they dropped out. Notre Dame was able to secure the commitment. What kind of led to that? And then we'll get to the rest of D-line recruiting there because I know you got a lot of good insight there.
No, I think Tiki really is a special kid, right? Like every time I've talked to people around him, and even sources on the Notre Dame side of things, like he is like a lot of these kids are smart and they're good kids, right? I don't want to shortchange any of them, but then sometimes these kids are above and beyond, and Tiki seems to be that in terms of maturity, right? Like every time I talk to people around him, it's like you got to beg them to talk about him as a football player because they just talk about how great of a kid he is and how like one of his ultimate things is he wants to use the platform to kind of preach his faith and spirituality and try to make a difference. And his coach told me he's going to make a greater difference. He's going to make a bigger impact on campus than he is on the football field, and all that stuff. When you hear it from multiple sources, you realize that it's real. So he came down to Notre Dame and SMU. I know some of us, I know Jamie and I were on a text message with someone else, and I was like, SMU. I'm like, why SMU? No one's saying that. And it's just like, I just don't buy it. I'm just like, I don't know, man. Like the people I've talked to, they're holding out hope. And like, I don't think people knew. Like, I really don't think anyone knew. There was that rumor that he gave SMU was silent. And I'm like, I don't think this kid would do that. And I think in the end, it was just he recognized the platform he'd have at Notre Dame. He felt like what they offered as a university fit what he was looking for. And, you got to give the coaching staff credit for going down there and making him a priority and letting him know that he would definitely fit in what they want, what their plans are.
How important is Myron Tagovailoa-Amosa to they've landed Polynesian kids before, so it's not like they needed him on staff for that to happen. But I guess someone like him who comes from like a similar background and just like Notre Dame seems to know when to kind of push that button of faith, right? It's not everyone that talks about it, but like it's very prevalent with the Polynesian community and those players coming to Notre Dame. I mean, Tiki Hola mentioned it. Kingston Villamuasa mentioned it, right? We've just seen it a lot.
Going back to Manti Te'o.
Manti Te'o, yeah. It's like Notre Dame knows kind of how to, or not how to push the button, but like when to kind of lean into that.
I don't know if it's so much them leaning into it, or if it's like literally like the university, like
it kind of sells itself, kind of.
Yeah, when
it is kind of that energy. Yeah,
if that's what you're looking for and that's something that's a priority to you, you're gonna feel it. You know, you are gonna feel it. Now, if you're a football player and you're just coming to football and academics, and that's not as important, that's there too. But you know, I don't think it's gonna take recruiters, and I'm sure they do preach it, but I don't think it's gonna be a recruiter saying, "Hey, you know, come here for X, Y, and Z when it comes to spirituality." I think you actually feel it when you're there. As far as Myron, yeah, he's going to be huge. I mean, that Polynesian pipeline, I think it starts with Manti, but like it went from Manti to immediately, you know, like they're getting dividends, and it kind of keeps going. And I think Myron is just it's a good, having him there is a good kind of solid, consistent base. And you know, I talked to Talanoa Ili, he's in Hawaii now. And we talked about Myron, and Myron's all over him. And he told me straight up, like, man, that makes a big difference because, you know, people talk about like a culture shock from like Chicago to South Bend, or from like, you know, East Coast City to South Bend, or anywhere like Miami or Texas. Man, you're talking about kids from California and Hawaii. That's a whole new culture shock. So when you see someone and they can communicate to you, I've been there, I've made this, I know it's going to be different, but here's what it was like for me. And not just kind of speculating on it, that makes a huge difference.
You know, and just to kind of take it to the SMU point about it too, I think one of the reasons why they were so heavily in it, and you know, they had a chance to land him, was because of Jake Lange, who, you know, was another Polynesian guy who was hired on, and the staff. He used to work at Texas in personnel. He's worked at a bunch of places, right? He's very experienced and a really good you know, scout and personnel guy. But obviously that is something that, like, you know, I mean, I follow him on Twitter or whatever. He's a guy that he is like promoting like Polynesian kids all the time, like just without whatever, not as much when he's, you know, when he was working privately, he does it more. He's not doing it as much when he's working for a program, but like he was doing that all the time. Like that's like a thing. And it's like, there's so many of these guys when they know that it's like, you're in it, like with them. I mean, that's going to attract people. It always is.
Yeah. CFB Hertz makes a point that Madden Faremo also, you know, kind of mentioned faith and everything. And I think on the MTA point too, I believe I mentioned this before, but A, it's important to have representation on campus, and B, like it also shows like he came back and they gave him a job. You know, it's like, you're not coming here. We don't want you to just be a football player. You can come back here and actually work at Notre Dame and be a part of the university. Like that matters, right? Like, and you just kind of see like, oh, I can be a successful Notre Dame football player and come back and be a part of the university as part of the staff, even if I'm not like, you know, Manti Te'o, right? Like MTA had a good career, but it wasn't like he was a superstar or anything like that.
Yeah, he was a captain, but he didn't play in the league for, you know, a number of years or anything like that. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So I think that's it's important for players to kind of see that, right? It's just like, hey, I'm not just a football player. And VSR isn't just a regular media company, boys. They do a whole bunch of things that you would think they can help with your social media page. They can help with your highlight reel if you have a highlight reel. They can help with a headshot for a business or whatever it might be. They have a one-stop shop for so many things for your media, and you need to go with VSR Media, of course, founded by Notre Dame football pregame host and Emmy award-winning anchor Vahid Sadrazadeh. VSR Media provides professional and cinematic video and photo. Whether you're looking for a collegiate or pro-level highlight reel, have a personal story to tell, or are aiming to diversify and grow your business, VSR Media specializes in short and long-form video storytelling, social media management, and website design. VSR Media also captures professional headshots, senior and sports photos. Contact them at vsrmediacompany.com. Mention Irish Sports Daily to receive 20% off your first project. Visit them online or give them a call at 574-800-9106. Christian, Notre Dame got Tiki Hola along the defensive line on the interior. Notre Dame is in on a bunch of other prospects there. What can you tell us about that position, where they might be going, who's leaning Notre Dame, who you're feeling good about maybe? What can you tell us about that position group?
Yeah, we'll have more on this in ISD Intel tomorrow, but, Notre Dame now, landing Tiki Hola to go with, Ebenezer and Rodney on the edge. They got a really good foundation at the defensive line now, and I like to say they have those good problems now where they have so many, probably don't have enough spots for all the guys they're going after. Not to say all these guys are dying to come to Notre Dame. They have to turn guys away, but they're in a very good position. I expect they probably, like I said, they have 3 guys now. I'm thinking they're probably looking for one more interior guy, a big body, and one more kind of strong side, defensive end guy. So, I know Noah Clark from North Carolina is a guy, defensive tackle they've had on their radar for quite a while. Will he leave that area? I don't know. But like I said, we mentioned ISD Intel, but if you look at his official visits, Notre Dame is the only one outside of that, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia area. So that kind of makes me believe maybe he wants to stay closer to home. David Schwartzel is another guy that from Washington. He's got a bunch of official visits set up, says he wants to set one up to Notre Dame. Let's see if he does. If he does, I think that'd be a very good sign for where they're at. Then they got the Alistair Viejo kid from Texas. I'm expecting him to be on campus twice next month. So it'll probably be a Notre Dame-Michigan battle there. And then the kid I mentioned at the start, Marcus Omada from Massachusetts, he's a kid that I think people weren't really sure. And when I mean people, I'm talking about people at Notre Dame, weren't really sure how's he going to fall after they got Tiki. But, that workout he had on Tuesday, me and Jamie were talking about earlier, he was impressive, and he could show he moved. And I literally liked what I saw from him. He's legit size. I think that they're going to continue pursuing him heavily. And he's a kid. He's taken official. He's already gone to UCLA. He's gone to Oklahoma State. Goes to Arizona State this weekend. He's got an official set to Notre Dame. He has some other schools in there, Maryland and Virginia. But he's a kid, like we were just talking about. What Notre Dame offers is what he's looking for. So if Notre Dame goes after this kid hard, I wouldn't be surprised to see him be a guy that they end up with. And then at end, Elijah Golden's he's one of those guys that's been on the board since the very, very beginning. They're going after him heavily. They still will. Kari Wilder is a kid from California, kind of similar to Clark. Is he going to leave home? I don't know. He's got a couple official visits set for the West Coast. So we'll have to see how they end up there. And then, Amada's teammate, Carter Gooden, he's a kid that could work his way into, Notre Dame offer. He's got a lot of official visits set up for the next several weeks. But, I know some people close to him, and they're really pushing, Notre Dame to get involved with him. Time is of the essence right now. But if Notre Dame were to make a move on him, I think they would be in the mix. But, timing's an issue, right? So spots are limited and timing's an issue. I don't think they're going to bump Golden out for anybody. And his time frame is pretty much undecided at this point. But right now they have more targets than they have spots, and that's always a good spot to be in.
How many, before we get specific, keep it on, how many players do you think, Luke Pettinger asked a question about, do you think Notre Dame will take 26 to 28 commits in the class? How big do you think this class is going to get? Just your kind of.
Yeah, I have no idea. I always say, it's at Notre Dame, it's a moving target. And now with nobody knows how many scholarships are going to be, the transfer portal, it's 5 different moving targets.
It feels so uncertain now, right? How obviously USC's got a ton of commits already.
I've heard they're trying to take 35, 40. That was kind of something was floating. I don't know if that's true. But.
The thing is because they can, because they're going to have they're below what would have been 85 because they get guys leave or whatever.
Right.
And it's obvious that Chad doesn't want to be taking 20 guys in the portal every year or whatever. Right. So he wants to kind of build out if they can get him. They're obviously going to sign a good class.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with Notre Dame. You see this momentum they have, if these guys are going to come, and you should ride the wave when you have this kind of momentum. And as long as you're not kind of rocking the boat with, look at that, ride the wave, rock the boat. What is this? Podcasting 101 here. But as long as you're not rocking the boat in terms of where positions and guys being like, oh, you only said you're going to take this many guys. So I get it at like running back, obviously quarterback, you're not going to take multiple guys and all that kind of stuff. But with D-line, O-line and stuff, I think you got to be kind of flexible of like how many guys, if there's a good guy, like another good guy who wants to come that you think can be a player, those are where those extra scholarships are going to go anyways, right? Yeah. Like DB, another one, right? Like those are totally things there. Or like receiver, they haven't recruited great at wide receiver. So it's like, why would you not take 5 if you can get 5 good ones, right? Like, I just think that's the way you kind of have to approach it. So I wouldn't be shocked if if Notre Dame took 26, okay. If they took 30, wouldn't be shocked either.
Yeah. Christian, just vibes on D tackle. Who do you feel good vibes about? Not that I don't want to put you on the spot and make like a prediction because I don't think we're there yet. But like, who gives you the best vibes?
I'm finding out that Alistair was planning on being on campus twice next month.
Yeah,
makes me really, really even more confident. And I think Matt has reported before that how high Notre Dame is on him. So that mutual interest there, but it might be a similar thing with Michigan. So it could be a head-to-head battle there. But knowing he's coming twice really, really gives me some encouragement there. And then, like I said, the Almada kid, he's moving up Notre Dame's board. And like I said, he hasn't been there yet. They just offered him in March. Speaking of Myron's first stop out on the road last week was to see him. That kind of, left a good, feeling. I don't think the kid realizes how good of a fit he is for Notre Dame. And I think when he gets to Notre Dame, he's going to realize it. I mean, he told me he's looking for academics, athletics, and then like an environment that he feels comfortable in. Like, I don't think this kid has any idea how well he's going to fit in at the Notre Dame environment. And when he gets up there, which I expect him to for an official visit, I think he's going to recognize that and recognize it quickly because, not to knock any other school, but I was pretty surprised he's going to Arizona State this weekend for an official visit. Obviously, Kenny's doing great things there. But he doesn't strike me as an Arizona State kid off the rip. Yeah. He visited Oklahoma State last weekend. That was probably the first big Power 4 offer he got. So I'm not surprised, but it's not like a kid like, oh yeah, he should go to Oklahoma State. That kid is a Notre Dame kid. Yeah. So I think that if they continue to push, I would not be surprised if it landed him.
Greg Wasserman put in the chat, tight end is becoming the new D tackle wide receiver area of concern. Are you concerned about tight end? Should Notre Dame be concerned about tight end?
I think they're in a good spot, actually, even though they haven't had any commitments. I think Premer was always kind of a bit of a long shot to me. Notre Dame feels like they have a better chance than I do, but like I had people close to him when he got offered. Seemed like they were saying like he's probably going to stay close to home. So I think that's probably the case. But I know they really like Evan Jacobson. Yeah. He likes them a lot. The Ludwig kid, Moose Ludwig, he came up and visited and seemed like it went well. Now they did offer the California kid, Luke Sorensen, last night. I haven't had a chance to hop on the phone with Luke yet, but I just know how Notre Dame and Mike Denbrock operates. They don't usually offer kids unless they feel like they're going to have a shot.
Yeah.
So my guess is, and that kid, he did text me back last night right away. So my guess is they'll have a pretty good chance there. But, the Gavin Muller thing, it surprised me the way he went about the process. But like once he decided he was definitely announcing this week, like I was like, Notre Dame's probably not even an option for him. It was just an odd recruitment for me. He told me pretty much like he always wanted Notre Dame offer and because he wanted to consider them. And so he these kids are 16. I got a 16-year-old upstairs, so I know how immature these guys are. His dad encouraged him, like, you got to tell Notre Dame before you cut your list that you're cutting your list and, you want to consider them, but they haven't offered you yet. That's a tough conversation to call Notre Dame and say, hey, you better offer me. But he did that and got the offer and was thrilled. But then to only just turn around and be like, yeah, I'm not going to wait an extra month to make my decision and take an official, it didn't add up.
Yeah, that doesn't add up. I will say too that with tight end in general, first of all, they're going to be fine. Becoming a concern, ease up, Greg. I think not Greg, Greg Wasserman in the comments. It's not going to be a problem. I don't think because the thing is that even if they don't land the top guys, they're still going to land guys. Like they will flip somebody or they will whatever because it's Notre Dame and tight end, and they can pick a guy from somebody else that is rising or something like that. That will happen. I think people also forget that like guys like Tommy Tremble and Mitchell Evans were not they were like the second tight end in those classes, and they ended up being much better than the first tight ends in those classes. And in a lot of years too. And if you go and look at so many of the tight ends in the NFL draft and these guys who are going like, cause not very rare for a guy to go in the first round these days, but there's a ton of guys who go in like second round. Right. And, other than like a Brock Bowers going in the first round, but most of the guys who go in like, that second round range, so many of those guys were just like great athletes who were not very highly recruited tight ends. They just ended up being like blowing up and like, growing and doing all these things. Tight end is I think is one of the worst evaluated positions in terms of recruiting rankings, not teams, but just recruiting rankings. Like, because I think people have no idea. They don't like measure it right. And when they don't have like athletic testing with some of these guys, they just kind of like, there's a lot of guesswork. And to me too, so many of these tight ends aren't guys that they're not guys who are like as heavy in the 7-on-7. They're not as heavy in terms of like, hey, I got to go to the under camp or whatever. It's not as big as the wide receiver and DBs. And I think it kind of shows when it comes down to like some of these guys who kind of get offered or kind of slip through the cracks.
Yeah. Speaking of wide receiver, Notre Dame has Dylan Faison and Bubba Frazier already in fold. They want to add at least 3 more, I think, to the class. They've got some good options. They've been in with Caden Finley for a while now, and they've recently added some intriguing prospects to that with Cohen Brown, Brian Williams, and players of that nature, Devin Fitzgerald as well. Christian, where do you see kind of that falling for Notre Dame? Who are they trying to get on campus? Who's going to be coming to campus, and where's that all going to shake out, in your opinion?
Jamie will test for this. We got a lot of mutual friends that are down in Texas. Jamie, when the Texas guys start talking about, if they even say Notre Dame has a chance at a guy, that means Notre Dame's got a good chance at a guy. Yeah. If they say they got a good chance at a guy, it means they have a great chance. If they have a great chance, these damn kids going to Notre Dame.
Yeah. So 100%. That's exactly how those guys are.
So, like, my guys in Texas, they think that Notre Dame probably has a good to great chance at Caden Finley, right? So I don't think they're giving up on letting them out of there. But, like, every time I talk, people call me unsolicited, like, yo, Notre Dame's got a good chance at Caden Finley. I'm like, I know. And so I think they probably get that one done. Another, Jamie was talking about former NFL son, right? That kind of stuff matters. Devin Fitzgerald, I call Caden Finley's Margin Hooks works out those guys. He's like the famed Texas wide receiver trainer. So I called him about Caden and a couple other guys, and he brought up Devin Fitzgerald to me. I had no idea he worked with Devin Fitzgerald. And so he kind of knew, this was a month ago, that Notre Dame was, serious about Devin. I asked Margin, what's it like to have Larry Fitzgerald ask you to train his son to play wide receiver? I mean, damn, that talk about an endorsement. So I think they will have a good chance. I think they'll have a great chance at Caden Finley. I think they have a good chance at Devin Fitzgerald. Cohen Brown, former USC guy, coming up for an official visit. Obviously, there's some serious interest there. So you said, Greg, they want to get like 5. So they're looking at different body types. The one guy that I think they might have, I don't want to say they lost ground as much as Miami picked up ground, is Braden Robinson. Little small guy. Notre Dame was his leader at one point. He tells me now it's Notre Dame and Miami are 1A and 1B. I don't think that it's going to get to a bidding war, but I'll tell you this, if you're trying to get an NIL bidding war, the school you don't want to get into one with right now is Miami. So I think that they have a lot of options there. Cohen Brown, Braden Robinson, Caden Finley being like the ones that we have our eyes on the most right now.
Weird to see Miami lose out on some of the bidding with some of the portal guys, though, that I would say, because they did obviously buy a lot of guys in the portal. You can check out my preview that I just put on the site for some of their DBs they got, but like, I'm shocked that they didn't buy a bit better receivers. Like, obviously Penn State paid a lot for Trevor Pena, or else, because there's no way that I thought that was like a slam dunk he was going to Miami.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Fran Brown wasn't happy about that one.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Yeah.
Irish One, thank you for the super chat. How do you think we end up at wide receiver? So I think we feel good about Caden Finley as of today. So we feel good about that. We feel good about Notre Dame's chance with Devin Fitzgerald. We'll see how things go with Cohen Brown. I think he had an official visit June 13th. I think that's what you said.
That sounds right.
Yeah,
yep.
so he's got to me. The way that it happened, Notre Dame offered him. He decommits from USC, and then the official gets scheduled. Like it just feels like I want to get to Notre Dame, have my official visit, cross that off, and I mean, I feel like we could be on commit watch at that point. Like, and that's just my vibe, right? And maybe that's incorrect. That's how it's kind of felt like from the entire situation. I think we'll see what happens with Brian Williams. It seems like that's been like how much is Notre Dame pushing? That's again my impression.
Sure.
And then obviously Mason James has been a name, but that's also like kind of Oklahoma, kind of that region is going to be the case. But I think if Notre Dame ends up, Braden Robinson, but like that was my I put it on the board. My quote unquote dream class was with Faison, Frazier, Finley, Brown, and Fitzgerald were my players. So obviously I'll be happy if that's where Notre Dame ends up. Cause I think you have I like the physicality of Fitzgerald, and I just like the speed. Like, Cohen Brown is a sub 10.7 guy. Bubba Frazier is a 10.5 guy, like legit 10.5. Like you have the speed. You have Caden Finley, who is that just classic. Like people are comparing him to Jaden Greathouse. I think he's got a little bit more juice than Jaden Greathouse does. And so, and then you have Dylan Faison, who's like a really good athlete. I think it's like a really good mix. For a long time, wide receiver did not look good, and I feel a lot better about wide receiver as we sit there today. They got to close on guys. It could very quickly go from looking good to like being in a bad place, but that's kind of where I'm at right now with wide receiver. Anything else on that, Christian?
No, that's about right. I think you summed it up well there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Let's move on to defensive back real quick. Notre Dame is in on some guys. They just got Devin Pouncey. They have Chasen Smith already in fold as well. They're hot after Joey O'Brien. That's going to be a big one. Kari Adams is another big one that Notre Dame wants to land. Where do you think Notre Dame stands at DB? I think people are getting a little bit nervous about DB. Where do you think Notre Dame is there?
Yeah, Jordan Thomas announcing that he was going to make his decision, which he did earlier this week. That was a blow, right? I know Notre Dame had been making up ground, but when he made the decision to announce, like it was pretty clear he was going to end up at Ohio State. That's a kid we talked about, Marcus Omata. Just because the kid is a Notre Dame fit doesn't mean he's going to end up at Notre Dame. Those kids are generally successful wherever they go. Jordan Thomas was an absolute Notre Dame fit. Makes the recruitment of Kari Adams that much more important. He's a big time, guy for them. And
love Kari Adams.
I don't know. I'll defer to Jamie. Is there a more important recruit left than Joey O'Brien?
I mean, maybe Kari Adams or whatever. It's like, yeah. I mean, I would say those right now, just based on kind of like the DB board. I'm sure they're going to offer more guys in this.
I think that's pretty important, but
yeah, he's definitely important.
Yeah. Those three are kind of where it is.
I just kind of think that, if you're looking at kind of like where they're at with the board at DB right now, or just like you look at like the target lists on ISD, and obviously with their board changes and all this, and they're out on the road now, but it just seems like they kind of have to hit on like almost like have to have a very high batting average on the guys they have left. And obviously, like those guys are great players. Adams and O'Brien are just awesome prospects, which makes it even more important to land them. But it's also not like a slam dunk that you're going to get them, right? Like it's not a situation where I think the one thing, like, Greg, with Finley is that as Christian mentioned, like
You feel good
there
about
are really good vibes that this is going in the direction.
He's been there
And it's not
15 times.
and it's not to say that there's bad vibes about those other guys, but it's not the same in terms of like, oh, like just get that guy on campus next time and it's probably a done deal. Like it's not quite there with those guys. So it's going to be important. Like the next, month and couple months are going to be super important for those guys. So and yeah, those guys are just I think they're both awesome. Like they're just both just outstanding guys, and guys that they're the guys when we're talking about like, you're going to play, you're either going to play with them or you're going to play against them in the college football playoff. Those guys. So that's another reason why those guys are super important.
Yeah. The other guys I mentioned, Nick Reddish at safety. I think he's a guy that they get. I think they get him. And then Donovan Webb from down in Texas. They just offered him. He's coming up for an official visit. So things seem to be moving quickly there. But, those are the guys that we're really keeping an eye on. And it's kind of different than what we were talking about with, like, the way the running back board ended up. And, they got so many guys, and the way defensive line looks right now. And you're right. Like, defensive back is like, all right, what are we going to do if we don't hit on these guys? We're going to have to, like, look at some other options.
Yeah. Go ahead, Jamie.
No, I was just going to say no, actually, you go ahead, Greg.
I was just gonna kind of wrap it up. I was gonna mention I'm waiting for Mike to pop in the chat. We didn't say
Reddish,
that Nick Reddish is the most important player in the class.
I'm here representing Mike.
Yeah, so it's a good football player. It's good. But O'Brien and Adams are different. They're different caliber of players. It's like Jamie said, like you either have them on your team, because that's the other part. It's like you want them on your roster, so they're also not on someone else's roster, and you got to play against them. That's a good point. Jamie, you wanted to go ahead.
Well, it not to totally pivot off of Notre Dame, but I think Xavier Griffin, how he decommitted from USC, which I think whatever Greg and I had talked about, that hey, this is going to happen at some point. We knew that was going to happen at some point in time. But even though that's a good thing for Notre Dame, you're not going to play him every year. He's right. Obviously an awesome football player, but you look at the list of who is like, where he's going to take his visits and who are his finalists. It's like, I mean, now I think where before Notre Dame, if you're looking at like kind of opposing recruiting, you're always like, fans are thinking, I hope this guy doesn't go to USC, or I hope this guy doesn't go to back in the day to Stanford. I hope Stanford doesn't get him or whatever. And now or Clemson or whatever, now obviously it's going to be a big one, but you kind of have to look at all of the top tier teams and be like, like that guy, because if you're going to go and actually compete for national championships, which they are in a much better position to do that now. And I think that, that's where you're going to see Notre Dame is going to have rosters where they can go on these deep playoff runs. Well, when you go on these deep playoff runs, you got to block Abdul Carter. Yeah. You got
Quinchon Jeremiah Smith.
You got to cover Jeremiah Smith. You got Quinchon Judkins and Travion Henderson in the back. That's what it is, right? So it's like you got to have. If you don't get Joey O'Brien, you better get Kari Adams, right? Like it's one of those things, because it's like you got to have kind of match what these other teams are doing.
Jamie, you had a big picture question for Christian as we wrap up here.
Oh yeah. First of all, before I do that, just a shout out to Dan Adams, who went in the chat, we used to meet up with in Portland all the time when Chris and I we used to go out to the opening.
Would organize that. He'd set that thing up all the time. It was great burger spots.
Oh, awesome. First of all, awesome dude. Good times out there in Portland. I know Chris and I are huge fans of Portland. Loved it there. So just shout out to Dan. Thanks for listening. I mean, long time ISD guy, obviously. But my question for Christian, because I was thinking about this it kind of relates to the Tiki Hola thing and talking about like, his coach was just like obviously gushing about him as a person and all that. And there's a lot of times where it's easy to kind of like fall in love with the kid as a person, just because I'll always think back to this, Chris, that kid, I don't even remember his name, but the kid, I think he was from Virginia, there was a 1 year at Invasion, and he was working to get an offer. And we heard him talk, and we're like, this guy's going to be the president of the United States. He was like the most well-spoken, nicest kid you've ever met. He was like, shake everybody's hand, just the most polite guy you ever think. And he was just, he had a presence about him that, I mean, and to me, it made me think, I'm like, I don't know if this guy's good enough for Notre Dame, but you kind of want him to go to Notre Dame because of that, right? But I was just thinking, because you obviously have such a great relationship with high school coaches. You talk to so many of these guys over the years, and, you know, there's some of the guys that you're getting, and most of these guys are promoting their guys, right? They're promoting their guys, and like, because they want their guys to go to Notre Dame. They want them to go to the biggest school possible. But I wanted to ask you, do you ever notice a difference when some of these guys, when, you know, say everybody's on the same level, you think, hey, this guy's good enough to go to Notre Dame, and they, instead of like gushing about him as a player, they're gushing about him as a person. And what do you think? Like, is it a higher hit rate when those guys, when there are those types of personalities, those guys that are like, man, people are drawn to this guy. This guy's going to be a culture setter or whatever. Compared to, obviously, so many of these guys are like maybe some of the best players that ever played at their high school. And there's a lot of people, they talk about that, and it's not like a bad thing when they talk about it. But I always notice, because honestly, before I go and update any grades that I do for any of the stuff guys on ISD, I always go and read. Like, I look to see, like, hey, maybe just in case I didn't see this, if Chris wrote a story on this kid and he talked to like the trainer, he talked to the coach and what they said about him and all that kind of stuff. And yes, some of the trainers and some of these coaches are just pumping their guys. I get it. But I do notice a difference to me. And maybe it's just anecdotally. I haven't like done and like, you know, put it in a spreadsheet or data or anything like that. But it does seem like when talent is equal and all that kind of stuff, that when they talk about these kind of guys, like they talk about Hola, those guys end up being pretty darn good players and great fits at Notre Dame.
Yeah, I would say that you're right? If you went down it and we could grade each guy just like, you know, subjectively, it would be interesting to see what the data would provide. But to me, it's about character, right? And character is not, yes, we all want to have great character, so we're good members of society, you know, and help other people, X, Y, Z. That makes sense. But when you're in this position they're in, these guys are all the man, right? At high school, they're the man. And if I would have been in their position, I'd like to think my coaches would say nice things about me, but like I probably would have been a bit of a jerk, right? Like if I'm 16 years old and I've got everyone tell me how great I am, I'm going to start thinking how great I am. And the reality is, for 99% of these guys, they're going to be confronted with adversity when they get to college, right? They're going to be uncomfortable. They're going to be away from home. They're not going to be starting right away. They're going to be around a bunch of new people. And when adversity hits, you're going to be able to say, you're going to start pointing fingers at others and blaming them, or you're going to start saying, all right, I'm ready to accept this challenge and work through it. And I think that's the difference. That's kind of what I look for. When I hear the character stuff, I want to know, when this person experiences adversity, how are they going to handle it? Some guys embrace it. I mean, and a lot of it comes natural, right? It's just like they were born with it. Like this person I've talked to, you know, Manti's one of the ones. I remember the first time I ever talked to him, this guy, he was more mature than I was at the time. But some of them, you talk to their coach or usually their parents, and they're like, I put this kid in uncomfortable situations. Not the parent that's like, oh, Johnny's the greatest ever, he needs X, Y, and Z. The parent that's like, we challenge our kid. We challenge him all the time so that he's ready, so he's comfortable in uncomfortable situations. Because when they get to college, they're going to be in uncomfortable situations. And now the portal's there. How are you going to deal with it? It's kind of, you know, the way some parents I've become very close with, and, you know, I never, ever tell them what to do, but they'll ask me advice. And the one thing I will tell them is like, this got to be your kid's decision no matter what. Because if you force them to go somewhere they don't want to go, when that adversity hits, the first thing you're going to think is, man, I didn't want to be here anyways. I didn't want to be here. I should have gone to that school. If I went to that school, this wouldn't be happening. That's not what you want. You need that kid to say, all right, I'm ready. I'm built for this. I'm putting my head down and I'm fighting through this adversity. And that's when you're going to succeed. And that's the kind of impact you have on your teammates when it's kind of even, you know, selfish to begin with.
That was just what you were saying too about like the adversity part. I think is so huge, because I mean, I'm not going to name names, but there's definitely a kid that I could think of that I think he was just, and his parents were good people. His parents are good people, so it's not on his parents, but he was just a guy that everything kind of went right for him. He was always the guy, and then adversity hit him at Notre Dame, and it was over for him. He wasn't a guy who was equipped to deal with it. And then obviously he didn't stay at Notre Dame. And then also too, just like thinking about it, and also I won't name names, but Chris, I know you had experience with a kid who went to Notre Dame at the opening, who was not you could tell he was the opposite of a Manti Te'o, just in terms of maturity and whatever. And I want to mention too that like I remember talking with him, interviewing him later on at Notre Dame, and he was a different kid. Like he grew up quite a bit at that time. But I think one of the reasons too, he wasn't someone who lived up to the billing of what.
Yeah, he wasn't
supposed
terrible.
To be.
He wasn't
terrible. I mean, but he wasn't that guy. And everyone you would have saw him physically in high school, and you would have said, 100% he's going to be that guy. Like this guy's going to play in the NFL for 10 years or whatever. But it didn't end up happening for him. And I think like one of the reasons was it took him a long time to grow up. Mm-hmm. And that's part of it too. So it's like you don't want to give up on guys who aren't maybe quite mature yet, who obviously have that talent, but it is a fine line between like, man, this guy, I don't know if he's ever going to get it, because a lot of those guys are the guys who flame out after 1 year at Notre Dame.
And there's a difference. I think there's a difference between the guys we're talking about that are like elite character traits that are just like off the charts that are going to fight through adversity, and just like your regular old person, or even like, I don't want you to be a jerk. I would label that kid from the opening a jerk, right? You don't need to be that, but if you have some hard ass and you have some like arrogance to you, I don't think that's the worst thing in the world either, because that's also you might not even notice the adversity when you're like that. So you don't need to be like the guy that's going to be future president of the United States. But it helps. That character piece, man, I'm telling you, it helps.
And I think just to kind of bring it all together, like I think Marcus is better at identifying this than BK was at times. And I think that's kind of the difference. Like I think Marcus
BK didn't get a chance to know him. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Marcus really like makes he makes a concerted effort to find out like who is going to be able to handle this place and who isn't, right? And I think that's a big part of it. And I think that is why, I think he's doing better. Like he is honing in on exactly, Brian Kelly always talked about like RKGs or whatever, but I don't know that he was actually good at identifying it. And I think Marcus is like, he kind of walks that mantra a little bit better than BK did. That's just my impression.
I think he attracts that person, right?
Yes.
One thing you talk about someone being an inspirational leader, like obviously he's that, but that's not just, to me, it's not just like we're in a room and you're going to inspire us, right? Like you have to be like willing to receive the inspiration, right? And if you already got it figured out, you don't need to know anyone to tell you anything. You're not going to embrace or feel that level of inspiration he's providing. And I think it probably humbles some kids too. Some kids probably come in thinking they are all this. They sit down with him. They're like, damn, that guy's kind of, man, like I kind of want to be more like that. And it kind of humbles them. So I think he both attracts it and is able to kind of put people in his place without being off-putting at all. I think that's a really, really good combination that he has.
Yeah. And then we kind of spoke before, proof of concept. When you're able to be that, and then you're also able to beat Dabo, you're able to beat Kirby Smart, you're able to beat James Franklin, you're able to beat Lincoln Riley. Like all these guys would have been on all the top 5 coaches lists 2-3 years ago, right? And now Marcus Freeman has beaten them in the highest leverage moments that you can have. So it's very important. So and look, we're showing it, right? They could have their best recruiting class that they've had in a very, very long time. We can end it there. Christian, you rocked them. That was great. So we'll try to get you back on sooner than we normally do. But look, you're a busy guy. There's a lot coming up with June visits and official visits and all those things. There's going to be a very exciting time. So no better time to head over to irishsportsdaily.com, take in Christian's updates, take in Matt's updates, and sign up, be a part of our show. You can also hit the like button on this video. You can hit the subscribe button so you know whenever we're going live, and hit the notification bell as well. We will be back on Monday with Power Hour with Mike and Jamie, and then Jamie and I will be back on Tuesday and Thursday of next week. So have a good day, everyone. Have a good weekend. We will talk to you next week. Keep hitting and hustling.